Video games in the last 10 years have certainly seen some notable changes, some for the best and, well, some for the definite worst, and that's what I want to discuss in today's video. I'm by no means the first person to have thrown their hat in the ring. I'm just giving my perspective as a reasonably new gamer who has grown up with gaming for the last 20 years of my life. Number 1. Poor launches. Video game development is a daunting task, and it's common knowledge at this point that they rarely release in their best possible state. However, some games go above and beyond to take the piss and show what is truly possible. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet certainly met the standard for gameplay, and the storyline was pretty decent. However, it was easily the worst generation in the series on launch. Sure, the Switch isn't the most powerful tool in the shed, however, when we get releases such as Tears of the Kingdom and Super Mario Odyssey, what exactly is this game's excuse? Awful frame rates, glitched character models, and misplaced objects in the world really left a sour taste in mouths on launch. Redfall was a poor showing for Xbox and developer Arcane Studios, plagued by poor performance on PC, limited graphical options on console, and lackluster enemy AI, especially at its $70 price point. A Borderlands-esque looter shooter fighting vampires, and this is what you could give us? Mass Effect Andromeda was intended to be the next step forward for the franchise, however its launch was subject to numerous bugs, glitches, poor animations, with many players noticing the game's uncanny facial animations in particular, and that's not even going into the subpar gameplay this title subjected us to. Fallout 76's servers were notoriously unstable on launch, so much so that it would make a certain pair of towers blush. Not only did the Wasteland lack any notable NPCs or anything of that nature, and cheating and item duplication were rampant in the community, making it debatably the most notorious entry in the Fallout series. Despite Battlefield 2042's trailer promising exciting battles in dynamic, constantly changing settings, the game's initial release was a complete flop, sporting numerous bugs ranging from the simple graphical errors to players getting stuck in or clipping through level geometry were commonplace. Perhaps the biggest problem, however, was the game's lack of the most basic industry features, with an in-game scoreboard and voice chat not present until well after the game's release. Anthem was released as a game with hardly any redeeming features. EA's typically disastrous servers were the least of this game's problems. Progression was stemmed by tedious missions and somewhat forced co-op. Bugs were prevalent, and even some of the fixes only seemed to introduce more problems. Much like a Hydra, you cut off one head, another two take its place. Cyberpunk 2077 has improved drastically over the years since its release, and in today's climate, I view it to be a pretty great game. However, the catastrophe of its launch immediately made one of the most well-known examples of a botched release. The flamboyant marketing, combined with the numerous bugs and poor performance across the board, with the game being basically non-functional on previous generation hardware, meant that Cyberpunk would quickly gain the dubious honour of being pulled from the PlayStation Store, with full refunds being offered to customers as compensation for even owning the train wreck. With the recently introduced The Day Before being the worst example, as its launch was infested with the usual poor optimization you'd expect. However, this was the only game in recent memory I'm aware of that caused the shutdown of a company days after the release. The irony. And if I'm being brutal here, that's just scratching the surface. Number 2. Battle Royales. It's no surprise to anyone and their nan that I dislike Fortnite and Battle Royales as a genre. However, what can't be denied is that they really did change the gaming hemisphere and completely dominated sales, but not for the best of reasons. I dislike the subgenre as a whole, as they live and die on the notion that one player must win above all others, which inevitably results in the modes becoming pointless when hackers come on the scene. However, this hasn't swayed people's perspective of the genre, as there were a shit ton of battle royales made in the last few years. Fortnite gave way to PUBG, which gave way to Blackout in BO4, which led to Apex Legends and Warzone, which then resulted in Rumbleverse and Spellbreak. Before you know it, there were just far too many of these fucking games on the market. That's not to say that they were all bad though. My personal favourite was Fall Guys, as it was a refreshing change of pace, putting up to 60 players through colourful, cartoony, visually stunning mini-games ripped straight out of Total Wipeout, gradually eliminating people one by one until a champion prevails. It was a cool concept and I do enjoy it. but that's just one example of the many poor repetitive games in this subgenre. I also dislike the idea that once beloved IPs now need to include battle royales or risk falling into irrelevancy. Take Call of Duty, which gave us Blackout and Warzone, inoffensive modes on their own. However, it diminished how meaningful multiplayer was in those games and only succeeded in watering down the quality of those game modes and dividing the player base even further. Especially since Blackout was the replacement for a campaign in a fucking COD game. You what? Number 3. Battle Passes. These passes have been in the world of gaming for over 10 years now, and they certainly are a divisive topic. At their worst, battle passes feel frustrating and exploitative, with unreasonable demands on your time, turning a game you otherwise love into a second job. But at their best, they can be a great addition, an extra layer of progression that's satisfying to work through, and gives you worthwhile, satisfactory rewards for your time and efforts. Particularly in PvP games, they can provide you with a less skill-based way to feel progress in an often fiercely competitive environment, which, depending on who you ask, could be perceived as a good thing. For the most part, I would disagree, however, as surely what makes video games such as Dark Souls, Monster Hunter, Spider-Man, and even Call of Duty in the earlier games so satisfying is the skill ceiling and the idea that you practice and refine your skills, learn from past failings, and adapt to current situations accordingly to ultimately get better at the game. This would feel satisfying, however battle passes just feel like a hollow reward, a gift without meaning. Sadly, battle passes also contributed in affecting the gaming market with corporate bullshit. As Fortnite grew into one of the biggest games of the decade, it soon expanded its battle pass offerings and making more and more money off them. Soon other publishers naturally jumped on the bandwagon, and it wasn't long before the idea spread like wildfire. At first, battle passes were mostly confined to live service games, in a similar vein to Fortnite, but nowadays they're ubiquitous. Almost anything with online elements will shoehorn them in, including unlikely candidates as last year's Diablo 4, which managed to somehow be even more scummy than other games by making it unacceptably easy to accidentally redeem the premium pass of that game, redeeming items that you might not necessarily want, all because they didn't include failsafes to protect you from doing so. Number 4. Ruined franchises. Some game series might have been juggernauts in the industry at one point, however due to one reason or another, they've slowly ruined or become snapped out of the golden perspective of the respective audiences. Call of Duty is a great example, as it peaked back in Black Ops 2 over 10 years ago, and every subsequent entry has either had awful game modes, been mediocre all-rounders that didn't excel at any one thing, or in the case of Black Ops 4, straight up removed beloved content in the pursuit of battle royales. Resident Evil peaked all the way back in 2004 with the original Resident Evil 4, however the series moved in an action-orientated direction with 5 and 6, and whilst those games certainly sold well, they were underwhelming and awful, and the series rebooted itself, going from action focus back to survival horror, to the extent that if you play 6 and 7 side by side, it's almost like two different franchises altogether, with Resident Evil seeming content to just remaster old games rather than create anything new. Probably because Resident Evil 8 had somewhat mixed reception when that game came out. Silent Hill was a once iconic entry in the horror genre, however the series slowly fell off as the years went by, before going into a 4-year hiatus, only spitting out mediocre spin-offs before the last embers of hope were extinguished when the fantastic, gripping and terrifying PT demo was cancelled in 2015. Assassin's Creed slowly forgot the whole assassin part of the franchise, with recent games resembling Souls-like hack and slashes with weird fantasy-esque elements which feel completely out of place in a series renowned for rogue-like charm of titles like Black Flag. Maybe warning signs are there that the series should be put to rest when you're going to fucking Valhalla in an Assassin's Creed game. Plants vs Zombies was once a juggernaut within the tower defense and third-person shooter era respectively, with EA and developers successfully ruining both subdivisions with the lackluster Battle for Neighborville and the downright awful PvZ3. How can we also forget the Arkham games, which were truly fantastic superhero games and some of the best Batman media we've ever received, only for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League to, well, grace us with its presence, I suppose. It's actually hilarious and slightly pathetic how far developers are willing to go to ruin their once great series, and it leaves me wondering, what's next? Number 5, hope. What's that? You thought I was only going to be negative? Gaming has definitely changed, and while some franchises were ruined or made worse, some series were redeemed and became better than ever. After a long hiatus for both franchises, Spyro and Crash Bandicoot both made a comeback with the Insane and Reignited trilogies respectively, remastering those classic platformers into the modern day. Crash Bandicoot especially benefited from this, as not long afterwards we received Crash 4, and in many ways this felt like a long-lost direct sequel to Naughty Dog's games that fans had wanted, with outlets like Kotaku praising it for keeping the original gameplay style and adding in new items, characters, and huge levels. Resident Evil 7 did indeed prove that an audience is available for a more grounded first-person horror experience, and I'm curious to see what new entries into that series will look like. Sonic the Hedgehog has certainly had his ups and downs and all arounds, however the recent Sonic Mania, Frontiers and Superstars were definitely great games, far from perfect, but they definitely left the franchise with a glimmer of hope for the future. Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal quickly cemented themselves as two of the best shooters in the last decade, being fast-paced, frantic fun experiences that certainly have to be tried to be experienced. The recent God of War games continue to be fantastic stories in their own regard, with their fantastic gameplay and memorable characters that truly leave an impact. Baldur's Gate 3 and especially Elden Ring both demonstrated that there is still a market and audience for genuinely fun video games that defy the boring Battle Pass, Battle Royale trends, especially as Elden Ring won Game of the Year for 2022, with Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree DLC around the corner. Monster Hunter has released banger after banger since the early 2000s, with Capcom dropping Monster Hunter World and Rise, with World being my personal nomination for 2018's Game of the Year, and Rise having really fun combat despite the obvious cuts it had to make as a result of being originally a Nintendo Switch exclusive, with Monster Hunter Wilds on the horizon coming out next year. The Insomniac Spider-Man games continue to be incredible superhero games with amazing characters and story, and I cannot personally wait for Spider-Man 2's DLC and for Spider-Man 3 to be released. And that's not even going into fan projects and community mods, which help preserve old games and turn them into fun, creative new experiences, such as Call of Duty Custom Zombies, which continue to give us wild and creative projects, and Left 4 Dead 2, which has phenomenal, entertaining mod support, and is an amazing experience as a result. Seriously, it's never been a better time to be a PC gamer. So ultimately, we have to ask ourselves, is modern gaming filled with issues? Well, of course it is. Is gaming going downhill? Well, it depends on who you ask. I personally have a few games here and there that are coming out on the horizon, which I'm looking forward to. I can only hope for the best, and give my opinion on this topic. What's going on, guys? It's Rift here. I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and comment your opinions on this subject matter down below. Thanks, guys, and as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day.